My name is Umar, founder of the Bureau Bullies. I've been in the credit space for well over 10 years now. Through multiple failures, I've learned how to beat these companies at their own game.
And then we're going to put together an action plan.
We built this platform to empower consumers to fight back against inaccurate credit reporting, abusive collections, and a system that depends on you not knowing your rights. Through education, strategy, and consumer law awareness, we've helped consumers remove millions of dollars worth of debt from their credit reports, and we've shown everyday working class people how to sue and win without an attorney. Our slogan is simple: sue them all. From the United States to communities around the world, the Bureau Bullies is here to help consumers stop being afraid, start understanding their rights, and take their power back. Welcome to another episode of the Bureau Bullies podcast, aka Sue Them All. A lot of people have been reaching out to me asking about the CFPB. This is a very, very important topic because at one point in the credit industry, almost everybody was utilizing it to get results in the credit industry, which I was one of those people. I could make the argument that I was one of the people that kind of ushered in the use of the CFPB because most people did not know what it was. But over the last 2 years, I have not used the CFPB for a host of reasons. The main reason is the CFPB is no longer effective. And the reason why it's no longer effective is because there have been powerful forces at play publicly and behind the scenes who have done certain things to undercut the CFPB. Now, initially, when the Trump administration came into power, their goal was to completely dismantle the CFPB, but they didn't know, you would think a president would know this, but they did not know that a president doesn't have the power to dismantle that type of government agency without an official act of Congress. But what he ended up realizing was he does have the power to understaff the CFPB. Now, before we officially jump into that, we're going to talk about the history of the CFPB so most people can see and understand the use of the CFPB and why it was really important, a very important tool for the average consumer. Now, I don't know if most people remember, in 2008, we had possibly, at least in my lifetime, the biggest financial crash ever. We're not going to get heavily into the history of that, but we know that banks were just giving loans out to anybody, whether you could pay the loan or not. And not only were they giving loans out to anybody, they were putting these insane balloon payments on people who already couldn't afford the loan they were getting in the first place. This caused the financial crash to 2008. Now, we fast forward, Barack Obama comes into office. When he comes into office, he signs in the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Now, people think Obama was the complete usher of the CFPB. He was not. The real person behind that was Elizabeth Warren. But the reason why he signed it in was much like similar to what happened in 1933, was Obama had to restore the public confidence in the banking system. Now, if you've been reading the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you know that this is FCRA language, or federal consumer language, about restoring confidence in public banking, because if the consumers don't trust the banking system, this entire system collapses. So in order for him to restore the public confidence, he had to show the consumer that they had some kind of power. Now, the average person can't just get up and go at a bank. That's very hard to do. So he created a regulatory agency, or signed into law a regulatory agency, which we know as the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, aka the CFPB. And what it's used for is if, your one complaint is not going to change the world. It would get you results, but what it really was a watchdog. So if enough people file complaints at this one bank, let's say Wells Fargo, the CFPB gets enough complaints, then the CFPB will look into that and they investigate, and a lot of times that will result in them suing that particular company, and every consumer that was affected would get paid out, especially if you submitted a complaint. This is a very powerful tool. Not only that, you could also use it for things like experience changing Equifax. Lots of people fix their credit using the CFPB, and I myself fixed lots of people's credit using the CFPB. Now, does the Trump administration have a personal vendetta against people fixing their credit? I don't think so. I think their vendetta is the people who are behind Trump, who fund everything that he has going on. Now, most people think that the CFPB is just used for credit complaints, banking complaints, etc. It's not. And I make the argument that we didn't get to see it, but it was going to be used for companies like OpenAI, and it was going to be used to regulate artificial intelligence. And so one of Trump's biggest donors, you always have to follow the money, is Greg Brockman, the president of OpenAI. And if you don't think that he had a hand in dismantling the CFPB along with Elon Musk, because Elon Musk was getting in a lot of regulatory trouble, they just put the money up for the Trump administration to undercut and understaff the CFPB, which in my opinion was the most powerful watchdog in my lifetime. I like to say it's the watchdog that stopped barking, because the CFPB still exists. So a lot of people are still submitting complaints, but the complaints aren't getting anywhere because they don't have the staffing to do anything about it. So for instance, Something that was a big headline was Experian being sued by the CFPB. You're not really hearing much about that. I don't know if y'all know, but there were well over 22 cases that the CFPB was overseeing as far as different banks and things, Capital One being one of them, that just completely disappeared. Trump made them disappear overnight. What a Biden era rule as far as overdraft fees, right? And I think an overdraft fee is one of the most horrible things on the planet because you're charging a person who's already proved they can't afford whatever they were trying to purchase in the first place. So now you're going to put them even further in the hole for not being. You're penalizing somebody for not having money. And a Biden era rule really helped with that, and people who went through it could file a CFPB complaint and get monetary relief and get their money back. Another one, medical debts were no longer allowed on credit reports. The Trump administration came in, undercut the CFPB, and then that ruling was reversed, and now medical debts are allowed back on credit reports. So we're going to look at a brief timeline of the breaking down of the CFPB. So in February, well, let's go back. Maybe we'll say December of 2025, it was rumored that there were going to be funding cuts. Trump attempted to fire everybody, but a federal judge, not a Supreme Court judge, a federal judge signed an order reversing the fire. So people were fired, then they came back. So if you filed a complaint during that time, people were fired, your complaint would just say you be in a waiting period. And it was like that for the whole 30 days those people were laid off. November is when the mass furloughs happened. Then December, the judge reversed them. Then we jumped to February. In February 2025, the new director that Trump put in place put a stop work order, right? And what that stop work order did was it nearly halted all operations. So even if you were there, you were not allowed to enforce anything. So people who were filing CFPB complaints at that time, literally, they were being submitted and the people weren't allowed. They were at work, they were still clocked in, but they couldn't do anything about it. Then in April 2025, the leadership moves to lay off 88% of staff. After that, that's when the overdraft fee cap and payment app oversight is repealed completely. And then in July of 2025, medical debts off the credit report rule is completely reversed. Now, what Trump did, and I can't just say it's Trump, what his entire administration did and everybody who's behind him, the CFPB had an annual budget of about $785 million, give or take. All of that went toward mostly paying their employees, and when they pay their employees, the investigations get done, etc. And then, enough things are complained about, such as Equifax, such as Experian, the CFPB steps in, sues them as we see. So they dropped the funding from $785 million to $446 million, almost half. Then he cut 53% of the workforce. So not only does the CFPB no longer have the budget to maintain the normal capacity that it has, but now it no longer has the workforce to maintain the work that's needed to be done to enforce all of this. There were over 22 cases against the biggest banks that we know, most of the ones we hate, most of the ones that's taking advantage of the average consumer. Every single last one except for two were dropped. One of them, the other two were transferred to the DOJ and they're just in limbo. Nobody knows what's going to happen with them. So looking at the inner workings of the Department of Justice, I can almost assure you they're not going to do anything about this stuff, right? On paper, the CFPB as a system looks completely fine because, the website is up, which is maybe 10% of what the CFPB does, or did, I should say. But in 2025 alone, they've received over 6.6 million complaints, double what they received in 2024, but they have less than 60% of their enforcement agency left. So you can only imagine the workload on the few employees that are there. Now they have double the workload, less the funding, and less help. Now in 2024, 99% of complaints were answered on time within 15 days by the companies. That has completely dropped in 2025. So now we're looking at a time where the complaint rate has doubled. There are more things to complain about, as you can see, because under the Trump administration, most of these companies have gotten a level of boldness that they've had before, but it wasn't as public. At least it was something they would hide, right? So for example, because we're in the credit space, we mostly only use the CFPB for submitting credit disputes. But I've had situations in my personal life where I used a payment processor such as PayPal, and they held thousands of dollars, and I used the CFPB to get it back. So let's say I was waiting, I can't remember the exact amount of time, maybe waiting 90 days, but I submitted that complaint, and that money was released in a week. So I say that to say that level of enforcement is no longer gone. So God forbid another situation like that happens, what am I supposed to do in that situation? Now, that's just for a business owner with a payment processor. What about the average consumer who has an issue with a bank, such as overdraft fees, illegal late payments, discrimination, what are they supposed to do? We're at a point where it's not just the CFPB, but even our state level attorney generals, they have become loyal to their own cult. So if this guy might be a MAGA guy and you submit a complaint against a company that maybe Trump might be in their pocket, you're SOL. I'm not going to say that on YouTube, but you can Google what that means. All right. Now, as far as what we're looking at with the CFPB, the data shows that the consumers who complain about credit related complaints have taken the biggest hit as a result of the CFPB being understaffed, right? So thus far, this is just thus far, 20% of the complaints that have been submitted, only 1% have been resolved in the consumer's favor. That's a very low percentage. So you have a better chance just not doing it. All right. So the biggest thing is that what I tell people, because most people say, well, okay, if the CFPB doesn't exist, what am I supposed to do? What I tell people is the best thing to do is not an FTC complaint. It's not a small claims court. It's not to start doing chargebacks. I wouldn't even say go to your state regulators. The best thing you can do is to sue in federal court, because the federal courts aren't going anywhere. They're not going to disappear. Even if Trump tried to understaff them, which he really can't, it wouldn't really change anything. This federal court is just going to exist as long as our system exists. Now, when a Democrat comes into office, do I think the CFPB may make a turnaround? Maybe, but we can't wait for that. Most people need results right now. So as it stands right now, the CFPB is no longer, in my opinion, a useful tool. You can't do much with it, and much like everything else in life, it's just a situation where the consumers and all of us have to just pivot and do what's working. And what's working right now is federal lawsuits, and I believe they will be working for the foreseeable future. So I want to thank you all for attending another episode of the Bureau Bullies Podcast, aka Sue Them All, and I will see you all on the next episode. Keep in mind, I'm not an attorney and I do not give legal advice.